Indigenous Peoples Day grew from decades of effort by Native activists who wanted a day that honored their history, cultures, and survival. Long before the holiday became widely recognized, many Native communities were already pushing back against the celebration of Columbus Day. For them, the arrival of Columbus marked the beginning of centuries of violence, loss of land, forced assimilation, and destruction of their ways of life. The idea of celebrating the man who symbolized that suffering felt deeply wrong. The seed of Indigenous Peoples Day began with that conflict, with people asking why the country honored an event that had harmed so many. The earliest movements began quietly in Native communities, especially during the civil rights era of the 1960s. Native activists joined other groups demanding visibility and justice. They fought for better representation in education, for treaties to be respected, and for Native voices to be heard in national conversations. The celebration of Columbus Day became a symbol of everything overlooked. Native leaders believed there should be a day to celebrate their cultures instead of glorifying the start of colonization. They wanted a day that honored the resilience of tribes who survived centuries of attempts to erase them. They also wanted people in the United States to learn the true history, not a simplified story that left out the suffering and resistance Native people endured. As the movement grew, the idea took on a clearer shape. Many Native groups proposed replacing Columbus Day with a day recognizing Indigenous people. They argued that this would help correct the historical narrative and give respect where it had long been denied. Younger Native activists carried this idea into protests, marches, classrooms, and political advocacy. They spoke about the importance of truth and the need to teach children about pre-colonial America, which was home to complex societies, advanced farming systems, strong trade networks. As Indigenous Peoples Day spread, debates intensified. Some politicians and citizens resisted the change, insisting that Columbus Day honored exploration and history. Others argued that the holiday ignored centuries of suffering experienced by Native populations. These debates often played out in city council meetings, state legislatures, and school boards. Native leaders and their allies countered by emphasizing that history should be truthful, that celebrating conquest was not the same as celebrating discovery, and that recognizing indigenous cultures could help heal centuries-old wounds. Media coverage helped spread awareness, showing both sides but increasingly highlighting the voices of Native communities. In many cities, Indigenous Peoples Day became more than just a replacement holiday. It became a platform to showcase Native culture, arts, and history. Museums organized exhibitions on tribal history, traditional crafts, and contemporary Native artists. Schools held lectures, performances, and educational programs that introduced students to Indigenous perspectives. Powwows, storytelling sessions, and traditional ceremonies became central to public celebrations. The holiday was no longer just about rejecting Columbus Day, it was about celebrating resilience, knowledge, and ongoing contributions of Native communities to society. Native activists also used Indigenous Peoples Day to address broader issues affecting their communities. Events often included discussions on land rights, environmental stewardship, healthcare access, and preservation of languages. These public forums gave voice to long-standing concerns while connecting the holiday to meaningful action. In this way, Indigenous Peoples Day became a tool not only for recognition but for advocacy. It reminded the nation that honoring Native history meant acknowledging the ongoing struggles as well as the achievements of Indigenous people. By the 2010s, more states and cities had officially adopted. As the 2010s progressed, Indigenous Peoples Day gained momentum in political, cultural, and educational arenas. States such as Alaska, Minnesota, and New Mexico officially adopted it, while dozens of cities across the country celebrated it with festivals, lectures, and community events. The holiday became a platform to celebrate Indigenous languages, traditional arts, storytelling, and dance. Powwows, often held in conjunction with the day, allowed tribes to showcase vibrant regalia and music, fostering pride and intergenerational cultural exchange. Schools increasingly incorporated lessons on Native sovereignty, land treaties, and cultural survival into curricula, making Indigenous Peoples Day not just a symbolic event, but a living, educational celebration. Many Native organizations emphasized that Indigenous Peoples Day was not about erasing history, but correcting it. Advocates argued that honoring Indigenous peoples provided a more accurate view of American history and highlighted the resilience of communities that survived colonization, displacement, and systemic marginalization. Educational programs focused on pre-contact civilizations, governance structures, trade systems, and spiritual traditions, showing the depth and complexity of Native societies before European arrival. By reframing the narrative, the holiday encouraged both Native and non-Native communities to engage with history critically and respectfully. Activists also linked the holiday to contemporary issues affecting Native communities. Events often included discussions on land rights, climate justice, missing and murdered Indigenous women, access to healthcare, and language revitalization. Indigenous Peoples Day became a day to honor ancestors, advocate for justice, and celebrate ongoing contributions to society. It connected cultural celebration with social activism, emphasizing that recognition of history must be paired with action in the present. This combination of remembrance and ADV. As Indigenous Peoples Day became more widely recognized, its impact reached into both policy and popular culture. Cities and states continued adopting the holiday, with some fully replacing Columbus Day and others observing both. New Mexico, Alaska, and Maine officially celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day statewide, while cities like Los Angeles, Seattle, Minneapolis, and Denver led public celebrations with large cultural festivals. These events combined educational programs, powwows, storytelling sessions, art exhibitions, and food festivals, creating a public space that honored Indigenous resilience, creativity, and history. Through these gatherings, communities not only celebrated the survival and culture of Native peoples but also fostered understanding and dialogue between Native and non-Native populations. In schools, Indigenous Peoples Day became a critical tool for education. Teachers developed curricula that explored pre-colonial civilizations, governance, environmental stewardship, and the rich spiritual and cultural traditions of Indigenous communities. Students learned about the devastating impacts of colonization, forced relocation, and cultural suppression, alongside lessons about survival, adaptation, and cultural revival. Educational programs emphasized critical thinking and historical accuracy, encouraging students to question myths and recognize the resilience of Native communities. Field trips to tribal lands, museum exhibitions, and visits from elders became common, giving students a first-hand understanding of Indigenous life and history. The holiday also served as a platform to highlight ongoing struggles faced by Native communities. Activists used Indigenous Peoples Day to raise awareness about land rights, climate change, health disparities, and the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Public discussions and workshops connected cultural recognition with contemporary advocacy, illustrating that the legacy of colonization continued.